Somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, there's a patch of rock so small you could walk across it in 20 minutes. No airport, no hotel, no people really. Just a couple of wardens and a police detachment. And yet, this place has triggered fighter jet flybys, naval standoffs, a knife fight, and a more than 400-page legal submission to the United Nations. The two countries fighting over it aren't rivals. They're EU partners who share a border with barely a fence and founding NATO allies. Welcome to the strange, quietly tense story of the Ilhas Selvagens, the Savage Islands. Here's where we are. The Savage Islands sit almost exactly between Portugal's Madeira and Spain's Canary Islands, roughly 165 kilometers north of Tenerife. Close enough to see from a Canarian fishing boat's radar, far enough to be forgotten by almost everyone else. The archipelago is really just three pieces of rock. Selvagem Grande, the largest, defined by sheer cliffs and enormous seabird colonies. Selvagem Pequena, smaller, tucked to the southwest, also thick with nesting birds. And Ilha de Fora, a jagged islet so difficult to land on that it's mostly left to the marine life. Combined, the whole archipelago covers just over 2.7 square kilometers. That's smaller than most city parks. There are no permanent residents. There never really have been. The only people who stay are Portuguese nature wardens, and since 2016, a small detachment of Portugal's maritime police. On paper, it looks like nothing, which is exactly why the argument over it is so revealing. Here's the legal trapdoor at the center of this whole story. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Article 121 to be exact, there's a very specific rule. Rocks that cannot sustain human habitation or an independent economic life get no exclusive economic zone. No EEZ, no fishing rights, no mineral rights, nothing beyond a narrow strip of territorial water. But if a piece of land counts as a genuine island, even a tiny one, its owner can claim an exclusive economic zone stretching 200 nautical miles in every direction. Do the math on that, applied to a spot sitting almost equidistant between Madeira and the Canaries, and you get tens of thousands of square kilometers of ocean, fishing grounds, shipping lanes, and, as we'll get to, potential oil and gas. So Spain's official position has been blunt. These are rocks, uninhabitable, uneconomic, nothing more than seabird cliffs poking out of the sea. In 2013, Spain formally told the UN it did not accept that the islands generated an exclusive economic zone at all. Portugal's answer: prove it's habitable by inhabiting it. Wardens stationed year-round, police patrols since 2016, even the president of Portugal spending the night. Every warden, every overnight stay, every flag raised on that rock isn't just tradition. It's a legal argument, performed in real life. This dispute is old. Back in 1881, Spain requested permission to build a lighthouse on the islands to help guide ships past the Canaries. Portugal agreed it was a good idea, but shelved it as not urgent. Spain's own foreign ministry, frustrated, admitted at the time that the sovereignty of the islands is unclear. By 1911, Spain threatened to just build the lighthouse itself, sparking Portuguese fears of a quiet annexation. Portugal sent its navy to survey the islands in 1913 and picked a site for a lighthouse of its own. Then came the moment that arguably decided everything. In 1938, the Permanent Commission of International Maritime Law formally ruled that Portugal held legitimate sovereignty over the islands. The catch? Spain was in the middle of its own civil war. It never got the chance to properly argue its case. Portugal bought the islands outright in 1971 and declared them a nature reserve. Spanish fishing boats kept getting arrested nearby. 1972, 1976, and repeatedly since. Then things got louder. In 1996 and 1997, Spanish F-18 fighter jets buzzed the islands at low altitude more than once. Portugal filed formal protests. Spain apologized. It happened again anyway, until Spanish officials finally recognized Portuguese sovereignty outright in late 1997. And then, in 2005, things turned physical. A biologist and a nature reserve warden on Selvagem Grande were threatened with a knife and underwater spear guns by a group of Spanish fishermen caught poaching. Portugal responded by stationing Marines on the island for a month. This wasn't some abstract diplomatic filing. This was a real confrontation over real fish on a rock most maps don't even label. So why is this dispute still alive today when the islands themselves are basically worthless real estate? Follow the water. In December 2014, Spain sent geologist Luis Somoza Losada to the United Nations with a 448-point report, formally requesting an expansion of Spanish sovereignty into waters that overlap Portugal's claimed zone southwest of Madeira. His own words afterward: "This was, quote, the biggest enlargement of Spanish sovereignty since Christopher Columbus." Losada's team had spent years surveying the seabed using 3 research ships, the Hesperides, the Miguel Oliver, and the Sarmiento de Gamboa. What they found: signs of gas and possibly oil beneath the waters around the islands. That same period, Spanish energy giant Repsol was preparing to survey nearby Canary waters for oil and gas, a plan announced by Spain's own head of government. Interestingly, not everyone in Spain was thrilled about this. In September 2014, Canarian secessionists actually staged a protest on Selvagens Pequena, not against Portugal, but urging the EU to stop Spain's own government from letting Repsol's drilling threaten the island's fragile ecosystem. After 2 days, the Portuguese Navy quietly ferried them back to Madeira. So even within Spain, this wasn't a simple US versus them. It was islands versus oil, wrapped inside a sovereignty dispute, wrapped inside a century-old grudge. Today, nothing here has technically been resolved. Spain still disputes the extent of Portugal's exclusive economic zone. Portugal still treats every visit, every patrol, every presidential trip as a quiet reaffirmation of ownership. In 2016, Portugal's president visited again, saying simply that wherever the head of state goes, he marks the nation's territory. For now, the battle for the Savage Islands isn't fought with warships. It's fought with legal filings, seabird counts, and the occasional overnight stay by a president who really wants to make a point. It's a reminder that in the modern world, sovereignty isn't always won on a battlefield. Sometimes it's won one bird count, one police shift, one diplomatic letter at a time, over a rock barely big enough to hold a picnic.